going to go back to what I addressed at the outset. I mean, this was not only sloppy, it not only violated all procedures, but if this information had gotten out, American lives could have been lost. The Houthis had this information, could reposition their defensive systems. So I want to get a little more information about this. Director Gabbard, did you participate in the group chat with Secretary of Defense and other Trump senior officials discussing the Yemen war plans?
Senator, I don't want to get into the specifics.
Ma'am, were you on? You're not going to be willing to address. So you're not, are you denying, will you answer my question, ma'am? You were not TG on this group chat?
I'm not going to get into the specifics.
So you refuse to acknowledge whether you were on this group chat?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the specifics.
Why are you going to get into the specifics? Is it because it's all classified?
Because this is currently under review by the National Security Council.
Because it's all classified? If it's not classified, share the text now.
As the White House previously
stated, is it classified or non-classified information on this text?
I can confirm.
Director Radcliffe, were you on the group chat?
Senator, I was on a signal messaging group.
So you were the John Ratcliffe on that chat?
I was.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I provide some context, Senator, to that?
Yes, but I've got a series of questions.
Well, but I think it's important because at the outset you made a couple of comments about signal messaging using encrypted apps. So that we're clear, one of the first things that happened when I was confirmed as CIA director was signal was loaded onto my computer at the CIA, as it is for most CIA officers. One of the things that I was briefed on very early, Senator, was by the CIA records management folks about the use of signal as a permissible work use. It is. That is a practice that preceded the current administration to the Biden administration.
Director Ratcliffe, I've got a series of questions. If you're making the statement, making the statement, the signal is a secure channel.
No, can I answer that? It is.
I've got a series of
decryption. So to finish,
I understand encryption.
It is permissible to use to communicate and coordinate for work purposes, provided, Senator, that any decisions that are made are also recorded through formal channels. Right. So those were procedures that were implemented. My staff implemented those processes, followed those processes, complied with those processes, and finally, just please, so my communications, to be clear, in a signal message group were entirely permissible and lawful and did not include classified information.
Well, we will make that determination, because if it's not classified, share the text with the committee. You know, let me go on. Director Gabbard, you are the security executive and set access guidelines for classified information. Did you contact the defense secretary or others after this specific military planning was put out and say, hey, we should be doing this in a SCIF?
There was no classified material that was shared in that.
So then if there was no classified material, share it with the committee. You can't have it both ways. These are important jobs. This is our national security. Bobbing and weaving and trying to, filibuster your answer. So please answer the question. If this was Director Gabbard, if this was a rank and file intelligence officer who did this kind of careless behavior, what would you do with them?
Senator, I'll reiterate that there was no classified material that was shared in that.
Ma'am, if there's no classified materials, share. And then if there's no classified materials, then you can't even answer the question whether you're on the chat. This is strangely familiar, and I think my colleagues will remember, when you couldn't answer the question, is Edward Snowden a traitor? Ma'am, I have serious doubts about anyway. Director Gabbard, I'm going to give you this. Tweeted just 11 days ago, and I'm quoting you, any unauthorized release of classified information is a violation of the law and will be treated as such. So if this information is classified, what are you going to do?
Senator, 2 points here. First of all, there's a difference between inadvertent release versus
careless and sloppy,
malicious leaks of classified information. The second point is There was no classified information that was on
Then the
the
information
signal
committee
group
should get
chat.
that information. Director
And the
Patel,
National Security
Director
Council
Patel,
has
my time's
reviewed
about out,
how
and I'm
this
going to use
occurred.
my 12 seconds that the chairman gave. Director Patel, has the FBI launched any investigation of this?
Senator, I was just briefed about it late last night, this morning. I don't have an update.
I would like to get an answer by the end of the day.
Director Gabbard, I didn't intend to get into the Jeffrey Goldberg story, but something you said has sort of puzzled me. According to open source reporting at 11:44 on the morning of March 15th, Secretary Hegseth put into this group text a detailed operation plan, including targets, the weapons we were going to be using, attack sequences, and timing. And yet you've testified that nothing in that chain was classified. Wouldn't that be classified? What if that had been made public that morning before the attack took place?
Senator, I can attest to the fact that there were no classified or intelligence equities that were included in that chat group at any time.
So,
And I
so the
defer,
attack sequencing and timing and weapons and targets, you don't consider should have been classified?
I
or
defer
were
to the
classified?
Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council on that question.
Well, you're the head of you're the head of the intelligence community, and you're supposed to know about classifications. So your testimony very clearly today is that nothing was in that set of texts that were classified. I'll follow up on Senator Wyden's question. If that's the case, please release that whole text stream so that the public can have a view of what actually transpired on this discussion. It's hard for me to believe that targets and timing and weapons would not have been classified.
Does the CIA have any rules about handling of classified information? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you, Director Radcliffe. Do you agree, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said this morning when asked by members of the press what had happened, he said this morning in Hawaii that Atlantic Editor-in-Chief Jeff Goldberg is a, quote, deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of providing hoaxes time and time again. Do you share that evaluation, the Secretary of Defense's evaluation of Jeff Goldberg as a journalist?
Senator, I didn't see those comments. I don't know Jeff Goldberg.
So do you share that view of the Secretary of Defense?
Well, I don't have a view on.
Okay. Assuming that he has that view, I'm curious about whether you are the CIA director, okay? This has happened. We know it's happened. Did Jeff Goldberg somehow, did he create a hoax that allowed him to become part of this signal thread? Please answer the question. You don't insult the intelligence of the American people. Did he invite himself to the signal thread?
I don't know how he was invited, but clearly he was added.
Clearly it was. Finish your sentence, please.
Clearly he was added to the signal group. Your question is.
You don't know that the president's national security advisor invited him to join the signal thread? Everybody in America knows that. Does the CIA director not know that?
I've seen conflicting reports about who added the reporter to the signal
You think that
messaging
it's
group.
perfectly appropriate that there was a reporter added, especially one that the Secretary of Defense says is deceitful, highly discredited, a so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes over and over again. Is your testimony that it was appropriate that he was added to this signal thread?
No, of course not. And
Why
Senator,
did you not
Well,
call?
hold on, Senator. You're mischaracterizing my testimony.
Good. You answered the question. Let me ask you. When he was added to the thread, you're the CIA director. Why didn't you call out that he was present on the signal thread?
I don't know if you use signal messaging app.
I do. Not for classified information, not for targeting,
Well, neither
not
do I,
for anything
Senator.
remote.
Neither do I, Senator.
Well,
To be
that's what your
clear.
testimony is today.
It absolutely is not, Senator. Were you
No,
not
I'm saying
listening
your
at the beginning?
No,
When I said that I was using it as permitted, it is permissible to
I
use.
agree that's your testimony.
Yeah.
I agree that's your testimony. You asked me if I use it, and I said, not for targeting, not for classified information.
And I
We'll
said,
see
I
if
don't
the
either.
record shows. I also know Jeff Goldberg. I don't use it to communicate with him. But you thought it was appropriate. By the way, I think he's one of the more outstanding journalists in America. But I'm shocked to find him on a thread that he's reading in the parking lot of a grocery store in Washington, D.C. And your testimony as the director of the CIA is that it's totally appropriate. Is it appropriate
No,
that the
Director, that
president's...
is not what I,
Okay,
when did
go
I say
ahead,
it was,
please.
when did I use the word appropriate?
Well, go ahead, please.
Well, I didn't.
That, everybody in America,
So, clearly,
there's nothing to
Senator-
see here is what your testimony is.
No, I never said
This is
that.
just a normal day at the CIA where we chat about this kind of stuff over Signal. In fact, it's so normal that the last administration left it here for us. That's your testimony today.
That's your testimony,
No, that's not
Senator.
my testimony. That's what you said.
I didn't say any of those things that you just related,
I
Senator.
heard you say it. We'll let the American people decide. Let
Well,
me
I
ask
think
you one final point. I'm out of
mischaracterized
time.
it. Well, are you going to give me a chance
Is it
to?
appropriate? Did you know that the president's Middle East advisor was in Moscow on this thread while you were, as director of the CIA, participating in this thread? Were you aware of that? Are you aware of that today?
I'm not aware of that
This
today.
sloppiness, this incompetence, this disrespect for our intelligence agencies and the personnel who work for them is entirely unacceptable. It's an embarrassment.
Senator,
You need to do better. You need to do better.
Thank you all for joining us and for your service. Just to make sure I understand some of the basics here. So Director Ratcliffe, you were a member of the Houthi PC small group signal chain, correct?
I was.
Yeah, and so were the Vice President, the Secretaries of State and Defense, the National Security Advisor, and Ms. Gabbard, correct?
I believe so. I don't have a list of who was invited to be on.
And so was national political reporter Jeffrey Goldberg, correct?
I don't know that.
Yes, you do.
I don't know Jeffrey Goldberg, and I've already testified. I don't know whether or how he was added.
Okay, well, he was a member of the signal chain, and the discussion included the Vice President's private opinion on the wisdom of proposed U.S. strikes in Yemen, correct?
I don't recall.
Vance, quote, "I think we are making a mistake. I am not sure the president is aware of how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There was a strong argument for delaying this a month." You don't recall?
I don't, as you
You don't recall seeing that?
read that, I don't.
It included the private opinions of the Secretary of Defense on the timing of strikes in Yemen, correct?
I don't recall.
Director Ratcliffe, surely you prepared for this hearing today. You were part of a group of principals, senior echelons of the U.S. government, in now a widely publicized breach of sensitive information. You don't recall whether the Vice President opined on the wisdom of the strikes? That's your testimony today under oath?
In that setting, I don't recall.
Here's what Secretary Hegseth said, quote, "Waiting a few weeks or months does not fundamentally change the calculus. Two immediate risks on waiting. One, this leaks and we look indecisive. Two, Israel takes an action first or Gaza ceasefire falls apart and we don't get to start this on our own terms." Your testimony is you don't recall the Secretary of Defense sending that message or reading it?
I recall there being an exchange. I don't recall the specifics as you're reading it.
Well, let's put it this way, Director Ratcliffe, a discussion by senior U.S. officials on the timing and risks of a proposed military campaign and disagreements between the president and the vice president about U.S. plans and intentions would be of obvious interest to foreign intelligence services, would it not?
Yes.
And they were discussing the timing of sending U.S. air crews into enemy airspace where they faced an air defense threat, correct?
I'm going to, Senator, defer to the other principles that you're referring
Director
to
Ratcliffe.
about what the meaning and the context of
They're
what they
talking
were
about the
auditing.
timing of U.S. airstrikes, correct?
Yes,
Yes, and therefore the timing of sending U.S. air crews into hostile airspace, correct?
yes,
And therefore the time period during which enemy air defenses could target U.S. air crews flying in enemy airspace, correct?
I don't know that.
You do know that. Let me ask this question, General Hawk. You lead America's signals intelligence collection. Would the private deliberation of foreign senior officials about the wisdom and timing of potential military action be a collection priority for you and the U.S. intelligence community?
Senator, it's our job to do indications and warning for both the plans and intentions of adversary leaders and for military commanders.
And would not information about the timing of airstrikes allow a military to pre-position or cue air defense systems to shoot down enemy aircraft?
I think, Senator, from our perspective, any advance warning is something that we certainly are trying to protect.
Director Radcliffe, this was a huge mistake, correct?
No.
A national
Hold
political...
on.
No, you
Let me
hold
answer.
on. No,
The
Director
answer- the
Radcliffe,
reason
I
I
asked
say
you a yes or
no-
no question, and now you hold on. A national political reporter
You can
was made
characterize it how
privy-
you want.
was made privy
The White
to
House has made
sensitive information
clear
about
that there
imminent
was an
military
inadvertent
operations against a
mistake,
foreign terrorist
Inadvertent
organization.
mistake of adding a reporter.
And that wasn't a huge
to a
mistake?
seal.
That wasn't a huge
Well, I
mistake?
think they characterize
This is
it
an
as a mistake.
embarrassment. This is utterly unprofessional. There's been no apology. There has been no recognition of the gravity of this error. And by the way, we will get the full transcript of this chain, and your testimony will be measured carefully against its content. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
A Senate Intelligence Committee hearing just ended, where we heard directly from the country's top intelligence officials. Now, it was scheduled weeks ago, but clearly upended by a jaw-dropping story in The Atlantic, detailing how the Trump administration discussed a pending military strike in a group chat on a messaging app, and then accidentally added the magazine's editor to it. National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard and CIA Director John Ratcliffe were on that chat, but told senators they did not discuss classified information. CNN's Alex Marquardt is following all the breaking developments. So, Alex, there were some stunning exchanges throughout this hearing.
Manu, this was an extraordinary hearing on a number of different levels about this incredible breach in security through this Signal chat that talked about the planning for this strike on the Houthis that the journalist Jeffrey Goldberg was a part of inadvertently. This was an extremely partisan hearing, Manu. Every single Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee focusing their questioning on this breach of security, on this question of what was in there, whether it was indeed classified information, and whether this conversation should have taken place on Signal. Not a single Republican focused their attention on that question at all, instead focusing on other issues that were included in what's known as the Worldwide Threats Report, which is an annual threat from the intelligence community. But the big question about whether anything was included that Jeffrey Goldberg was privy to on Signal was classified, we heard a clear no from both Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, and John Ratcliffe, the CIA Director. Ratcliffe was also asked whether this was a mistake. He responded to Senator John Ossoff of Georgia, no as well. Manu, let's remind our viewers what was reported by Goldberg in The Atlantic in terms of what unfolded in this conversation. He reported that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, on the day of the strikes in Yemen, that what he wrote contained operational details of forthcoming strikes on Yemen, including information about targets, weapons the U.S. would be deploying, and attack sequencing. Here's a bit of the exchange with Senator Mark Kelly, who was asking these intelligence officials about what was on that conversation on Signal. Take a listen.
Was there any mention of a target in Yemen?
I don't remember mention of specific targets.
Any generic target?
I believe there was discussion around targets in general.
Mr. Ratcliffe?
I think that's consistent with my recollection. Again, I don't have access to that. But
Was there any mention, Ms. Gabbard, of a weapon or weapons system?
I don't recall specific weapons systems being named.
I'm not talking about specific, any weapon or weapons system.
I don't recall specific names of systems or weapons being used or named within the
Well, I'm
chat.
not asking whether, I don't want you to tell me what the specific weapon was, but any weapon at all. Mr. Ratcliffe, same question.
I don't recall.
So, Manu, they're both the two heads of the U.S. Intelligence Committee saying they don't recall a lot of the details in there, but Gabbard admitting that there was discussion around targets in general. I would just note that Ratcliffe later on would admit that what he called pre-decisional strike deliberations, so the decisions about whether to strike somewhere, in this case Yemen, should be conducted through classified channels and therefore not through Signal. Now, there's also a part of this story, Manu, that points directly to Ratcliffe and whether he released any classified information through the identification of a CIA officer. He claims that was not classified. He also reported that what Goldberg withheld from his report, because it appeared to be intelligence information, that too was not classified. But they also seem to try to split the difference between who was revealing this information and saying that what they put forward, so what Gabbard and Ratcliffe put forward, was not classified by the intelligence community. But what Hegseth might have put forward, they need to ask Pete Hegseth about. So they repeatedly deferred to Pete Hegseth and the Department of Defense. We saw other Democrats like Ron Wyden of Oregon calling for the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, who started this chain, and Pete Hegseth, both to submit their resignations, and numerous Democrats saying, well, if this was not classified, then why not release the transcript of this conversation altogether? Because if it's not classified, the public has the right to see it. John Ossoff making the point very sharply there at the end that the Democrats on that committee do intend to get the full transcript of that conversation, Manu.
Yeah. And Alex Marquardt from Washington on the wrap of this hearing. Thank you so much. And we're going to weigh in more on that with our panel. But first, President Trump, he weighed in on the texting controversy this morning and said he still supports his national security advisor, saying Michael Waltz has learned a lesson and he's a good man. President Trump added this was, quote, the only glitch in 2 months and turned out not to be a serious one.